They told her it was just a tragic mistake, that her brother's death didn't mean anything. But Naomi Bell knew the truth ran deeper. What she uncovered wasn't a broken system, it was a machine built to disappear boys like him. And when no one else would speak, she did. This is the story of how one woman stood against silence and lit a fire no one could put out. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because the stories we tell are the ones they don't want you to hear. The early spring wind swept across Sycamore Bridge in slow, deliberate gusts, carrying with it the faint scent of pine, river water, and the quiet rot of a town that had learned to bury things long before they decomposed. Naomi Bell stood near the rusted guardrail, her arms folded tightly across her chest, not because of the cold, but because she needed something to hold onto, something real, something solid on the very ground where the truth had first begun to fracture. Below her, the Black Creek surged, a restless, churning body of water that had always been deceptively quiet in the mornings, deceptively calm until the rains came and washed through the hills, turning it into something fierce and unforgiving. Somewhere in that darkness, 2 weeks ago, they had pulled her brother's body from the shallows. His face was down, wrists bound, skin already pale and marbled from exposure, as if the river itself had wanted no part in keeping the secret. They said it was an altercation. They said it was justified. They said Camden Bell matched the description, but Naomi knew her brother. He was 17, wore glasses with one arm taped because he always forgot to get them fixed, wrote essays in cursive, and once cried in front of her after watching a documentary about wrongful convictions. He had never held a weapon in his life, never fought, never raised his voice at a teacher, never missed Sunday dinner, even when he was sick. And yet, according to Langford PD, he had somehow become enough of a threat to warrant a bullet through the back clean entry, no exit followed by a rushed coroner's report and a press conference that lasted less than 5 minutes. She remembered watching that press conference, sitting on the floor of her apartment, half in scrubs from her night shift, half in shock. Sheriff Mack, tall and clean-shaven, had read the statement with the performative gravity of a man used to offering closure he never believed in. A tragedy, he had said, but in accordance with department protocol. The news outlets picked it up within the hour. Local headlines used words like incident, altercation, and suspect. They included Camden's school photo, bright smile, tie crooked, and beside it, grainy footage of a hoodie-wearing figure walking near the Redfield gas station, just minutes before everything went dark. No one questioned the timeline. No one questioned the footage. No one, it seemed, wanted to ask the only question that mattered. What if the official story was a lie? Naomi did ... in the days that followed, while her mother slipped into a kind of silent grieving that felt more like stone than sorrow. Naomi dove into the only thing she had left: records, reports, timestamps. She stayed up long past midnight on work nights, scrubbing through public police logs, noting inconsistencies, tracing officer schedules, flagging every line in every article that didn't quite make sense. And that's when the envelope arrived. No name. No return address. Just her own, written in messy black ink, like it had been scribbled at a gas station counter. Inside was a plain, unmarked USB drive. She stared at it for a full minute before plugging it into her laptop. There was only one file. No title, no metadata. She double-clicked, and a grainy, time-stamped video began to play. The camera was fixed in the top corner of a convenience store, Redfield Gas, judging by the signage on the far wall. The time read 9:26 p.m. The video played in silence, security footage style, with a slightly greenish tint. Camden entered from the left side of the frame. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't panicking. He walked up to the counter, smiled at the clerk, and handed over a bottle of Gatorade. They exchanged a few words, inaudible, but relaxed. Camden reached into his pocket, pulled out some cash, and as he turned to leave, red and blue lights exploded across the windows behind him. 2 officers burst into the frame. Camden turned, hands instinctively raised, startled but compliant, then cut. The video ended, black screen. Naomi sat frozen, hands still on the mouse, her body suddenly aware of every heartbeat. She played it again. Same movements. Same calmness. Same abrupt blackout. There was no struggle. No resistance. Nothing even remotely close to a threat. But the footage didn't just disprove the official timeline. It exposed something much uglier. They said the incident began at 9:25 p.m. This footage showed Camden alive and cooperative at 9:26. Someone had lied, and someone had cut the tape. Naomi watched the security footage at least 20 times that night, each replay tightening the knot in her stomach, each second confirming what her instincts had been screaming since the moment she saw her brother's body laid out in that cold, fluorescent-lit morgue. Camden hadn't died in a chaotic scuffle or a moment of panic. He had been executed quietly, professionally, and deliberately. The question now wasn't just why or how, it was who else knew, and how far were they willing to go to make sure no one else found out. She spent the next day in silence, her phone on silent mode, her curtains drawn, laptop screen casting a dim glow over stacks of handwritten notes and half-empty cups of coffee. She mapped out the timeline again, this time more obsessively, marking down minute-by-minute data. From what she could gather, the Redfield gas camera footage had to have come from someone on the inside, or at least someone with access to raw security feeds before they were conveniently lost. Whoever had sent her the USB wasn't just a witness, they were part of the cover-up, or close enough to see behind it. By late afternoon, Naomi made a decision. She tucked the USB into a new flash drive, encrypted the contents using a tool she'd learned from a friend in cybersecurity, and uploaded a backup copy to a private cloud under an innocuous file name, TaxPrep2022. Then, after triple-checking that the file had synced, she deleted the video from her laptop entirely and removed the physical USB from the drive. Then she left. Not to the hospital where she was scheduled to begin her evening shift, not to her mother's house where grief hung in the walls like mildew, but to the one place she hadn't dared go since Camden died, the Langford Sheriff's Office. The building sat like a gray tombstone on the edge of Main Street, an angular mass of cement and tinted windows flanked by two flags, one American, one state. The station's presence had always been ominous, but now, knowing what she knew, Naomi felt something more visceral beneath her skin, like the air around it was vibrating with silent threats. Today, he wore his sunglasses even in the late afternoon haze, and his voice was too calm when he spoke. "Well, if it isn't Miss Naomi Bell," he said, as if greeting an old friend, instead of the sister of the boy his department had killed. Naomi didn't return the smile. "I'm here to speak to Sheriff Mack." Caleb tilted his head slightly, pretending to think. "Busy man. Got a full calendar these days. I can take a message." "It's not the kind of message you write down," she replied. "Ah," he said, stepping forward so that the toes of his boots nearly touched hers. "So you came to talk? Or threaten?" Naomi didn't blink. "I came for the truth." His smile froze in place. "Truth is dangerous around here, only to liars." That earned a small laugh, but the chill never left his voice. "You carrying anything today?" "Excuse me?" He gestured casually at her tote bag. "You know, a report, a video, a confession from God." She clutched the bag a little tighter. "Are you asking to search my belongings, deputy?" "Just curious," he said, backing off half a step. "Langford's been through a lot lately. Emotions are high. People doing reckless things." Naomi inhaled slowly. "Tell Sheriff Mack I'll be in touch. And tell him the story's already been written." Caleb's jaw clenched ever so slightly. "Miss Bell, you should be careful. People who make noise in this town don't always get to finish their songs." And with that, he stepped back into his cruiser, the tires whispering against the pavement as he pulled away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk, heart pounding not from fear, but from certainty. She was right, and they knew it. That evening, she didn't go home. Instead, she drove 40 minutes out of town to an old colleague's place, a travel nurse named Kayla, who'd moved to Boise and rented out a farmhouse on the weekends. Naomi asked to use her Wi-Fi, and Kayla, sensing something far more urgent than small talk, didn't ask questions. Naomi opened a fresh browser window, created a new email under an alias, and typed a short, direct message. If you're the one who sent me the footage, I need more. I need names. I need everything. We don't have time. They know I have it. She sent it to 5 message boards forums for whistleblowers, public defense attorneys, community activists. If the original sender was watching, they'd know how to find her. And if they weren't, well, then she just told every silent witness in Langford that the fight had begun. The email remained unread for 2 days. Naomi checked her inbox every few hours, always from a different device, always on a private VPN, each time with a blend of anticipation and dread coiled tight in her chest. Nothing. No reply. No bounce. Just silence. Langford had gone quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but suffocates. The kind that hides beneath it a storm. At the hospital, coworkers began treating her differently, not hostile, but hesitant, as if her presence had become a little too loud, a little too charged. Conversations paused when she walked into the break room. Eyes dropped to the floor when she passed in the hallway. Her supervisor called her into the office, just to check in, but the subtext in the questions, "How are you sleeping? Is there anything you'd like to talk about?" made it clear they weren't asking out of concern. They were asking because someone had told them to. She wasn't paranoid. Not anymore. Langford had begun to turn on her. Then, late Thursday night, the message came. No subject line. No sender listed. Just a single line of text. Meet me where he died. Midnight. Come alone. No signature. No instruction. But Naomi didn't need one. She knew exactly where to go. At 11:53 p.m., she stood once more on Sycamore Bridge. This time she came prepared: tactical boots, dark clothes, no phone, no ID. Only a penlight tucked in her jacket sleeve and a voice recorder hidden under her scarf. She had learned quickly that truth alone wasn't enough. You needed evidence. You needed insurance. You needed to be ready for the moment someone tried to erase you from the story you were trying to write. The wind whipped harder tonight. Cold and fast. It carried the sharp scent of something metallic: water. Yes, but also tension, fear, perhaps even blood that the earth hadn't yet finished absorbing. She waited. At 12:06, a figure emerged from the trees across the bridge. Hooded. Thin. Nervous. Naomi didn't move. The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a young man barely out of his teens, skin pale, eyes darting. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice barely audible over the water below. Naomi took a cautious step forward. "You sent the footage." He nodded once, then looked over his shoulder. "They're watching everyone. I work night shift maintenance at the station. The tapes come through a local server before they're archived. I saw what happened. I knew. I had to get it out. Why me?" Naomi asked. "Because you wouldn't let it go," he whispered. "Everyone else moved on. You kept fighting." Naomi stepped closer. "There's more, isn't there?" The boy reached into his jacket and pulled out a second flash drive. "This has everything. Not just your brother. There are other cases: arrests, body cam logs, internal memos, and audio. A conversation between Mac and one of the deputies, talking about your brother before the incident, calling it a reset." Naomi took the drive carefully, her fingers brushing his. "What's your name?" But he shook his head. "You don't want to know me. And I don't want to be known. Just do something with it." Before they do something to you, he turned and vanished into the woods before she could say another word. By 1:00 a.m., Naomi was back in her apartment, the door locked, curtains drawn, laptop open. She plugged in the second flash drive and held her breath. It contained a folder labeled Langford Ops, inside which sat subfolders categorized by year: 2016, 2017, 2018, all the way to 2024. Hundreds of PDFs, dozens of audio files. Scanned memos. Unedited arrest reports with red pen annotations. Internal complaints that were never filed. And then, one labeled CB Audio, WAV. Her finger hovered over the play button. She clicked. He's the little brother, right? Yeah. The smart one. Always poking around. You want me to handle it? Do it clean. Quick. No mess. Naomi's lungs emptied. She pressed stop. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a plan. She backed up the drive to 3 different clouds, encrypted them each with unique keys, then stored 2 physical copies, one inside a sealed bag behind her fridge, and one inside the lining of her winter coat. She was done waiting. Tomorrow, she would find someone who could help her get this really out, but for tonight, Naomi Bell sat at her desk, staring at the flickering light of her laptop, not as a grieving sister or a tired nurse, but as something entirely different. She had become a threat, and Langford was about to learn what it meant to try and bury someone who refused to stay silent. The next morning, Langford felt different. It wasn't the air, it was still thick with spring humidity and the sweet sour scent of blooming dogwoods, but there was a shift in the way people looked at her, subtle but palpable, like Naomi Bell had quietly become radioactive. Nurses at the hospital spoke in softer tones when she walked past. A security guard who usually greeted her with a lazy wave now avoided eye contact entirely. Even the janitor, Mr. Dennis, who always insisted on offering her a piece of gum at shift change, merely nodded and kept walking. They knew. Or if they didn't know, they had been warned. That night on the bridge had changed something. The boy. No, the man who had handed her the second flash drive had disappeared into the woods as quickly as he came, but the weight of that tiny device in her pocket hadn't left her since. It pressed against her leg like a hidden heartbeat, ticking away the seconds until it would be discovered, silenced, or unleashed. She had barely slept, drifting in and out of shallow dreams filled with water, whispering trees, and flashing lights. But when the morning sun filtered through her blinds, she rose with the kind of clarity that doesn't wait for breakfast or brushing teeth. She dressed, tucked the flash drive into the lining of her coat, and left the apartment without a word. She didn't go to the hospital. Not yet. Instead, she drove 10 minutes south, past the edge of town, down a gravel road where the trees leaned in like they were trying to hear secrets. At the end stood a cabin, half collapsed, overgrown with ivy and moss, the old Bell family property, abandoned after her uncle passed and left no will. It wasn't much, but it was off the grid, and more importantly, it had no internet, no cameras, and no neighbors. She slipped inside through the warped front door, the hinges groaning in protest. Dust motes swirled in the light from a broken window, and somewhere in the corner, a raccoon chattered and bolted into the shadows. Naomi sat at the old kitchen table, splintered, scorched in one corner from an ancient stove fire, and pulled out her laptop. She connected a mobile hotspot briefly, just long enough to download a forensic software suite, then shut it off and removed the SIM card. Then, with a deep breath, she inserted the second flash drive. The screen flickered. A folder opened. It was worse than she imagined. There were over 300 files inside, arranged in nested directories by year, department, and incident number. Some were PDFs, internal memos, arrest logs, complaint forms that had never been filed. Others were images, bruised bodies, mugshots of teenagers, evidence bags labeled with names she recognized from obituaries. But what stopped her cold were the audio files. The first one she clicked, labeled simply Mac 2018, played a muffled conversation between 2 men, one of whom she instantly recognized as Sheriff Mac. "He's just a kid," a younger voice said. Nervous. Uncertain. "They're all just kids," Mac replied. "Until they grow teeth, but this one. He hasn't done anything. Doesn't matter. He fits the mold. And the mold is what feeds the system." Click. Naomi sat back, eyes wide, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't just about Camden. It wasn't even just about Langford. This was a blueprint. A system of targeted arrests, falsified reports, fabricated evidence, all designed to feed young black and brown men into a private prison pipeline that paid out per inmate per day. The same facility she had seen mentioned in the public records Clear-River Corrections appeared repeatedly in payment logs and coordination emails. Bonus structures. Referral programs. Even a memo jokingly referring to harvest season, when school suspensions spiked. She felt sick. For a long time, Naomi just sat there, letting the rod of truth sink in, not because she doubted it, but because every new piece she uncovered made the world outside feel further away, more corrupted than she dared imagine. The town she had grown up in, the hospital she worked in, the school Camden had attended, the grocery store clerk who always offered her extra coupons, all of it felt complicit now, or at the very least infected, and once you see the infection, you can't pretend the body is healthy. Naomi didn't drive home after leaving the cabin. She couldn't. The thought of returning to her apartment, to her bed, her bookshelves, her framed photo of Camden and their mother on the kitchen wall, felt like stepping back into a version of herself that no longer existed. The woman who had lived there had believed, maybe foolishly, that grief and justice could walk hand in hand, that if she just asked the right questions and endured the silence long enough, someone in power might eventually do the right thing. But now she knew better. Justice wasn't given. It was taken piece by piece, file by file, truth by brutal, undeniable truth. So she drove aimlessly for a while, letting the roads curl beneath her tires like ribbon, until she found herself parked in front of a building she hadn't visited in over a year, the headquarters of the Langford Weekly. It was small, tucked between an abandoned bakery and a pawn shop that never seemed to open before noon. The sign over the door was chipped and faded, the paint barely clinging to the letters, as if even the building itself was tired of being ignored. But inside, behind dusty windows and yellowed blinds, sat the only person Naomi knew who might understand the magnitude of what she was holding. She knocked twice, then a third time, louder. A minute passed before the door opened. "Eliza," Naomi said softly. The woman who stood in the doorway blinked, adjusting her glasses with a cautious expression that gave way, slowly, to recognition, and then something sharper. "You've got that look," Eliza murmured. "The look of someone who just stared too long at the bones of a monster," Naomi exhaled. "You were right." About everything, Eliza opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in." The office was a time capsule, piles of old issues stacked on the floor, coffee-stained notepads littering the desk, a corkboard on the wall pinned with clippings, dates, names. A battered couch sagged under the weight of unfolded laundry and books with cracked spines. There was a sense of controlled chaos, the kind that only came from obsession, paired with exhaustion. Naomi sat at the desk without asking. She pulled the flash drive from her coat, placed it gently on the desk like a holy relic, and said, "There are audio files, documents, logs. I don't even know where to begin." Eliza, already moving toward her laptop, plugged it in with practiced fingers. "You begin by breathing," she said. For the next hour, they scrolled together, file after file. They listened to Sheriff Mack coordinate youth removal targets. They read emails between school officials and probation officers about preemptive flagging of black students showing disruptive tendencies. They saw spreadsheets with profit projections tied to minor drug charges and probation violations. Eliza said very little, only stopping to write things down or screenshot certain files. Her jaw tightened more and more as they went. Once, she cursed under her breath. Another time, she whispered, "My God," but otherwise, she let the evidence speak. And then they found it. A file labeled Juve Rec 40 for B-audio. The audio opened mid-conversation, already in progress, but the voices were unmistakable. "We need a new face. Last two didn't stick. Camden Bell's clean. No priors. No record. We'll have to massage it. He'll run? He won't need to. We'll say he did." The room fell completely silent. Even the humming of the laptop fan seemed to pause. Eliza closed her eyes for a long moment, then reached for her phone. "I have contacts," she said, more to herself than to Naomi. People who owe me favors. Small papers, a few underground networks. One guy who used to edit for PrePublica before he disappeared into podcast land. I can't promise the big guys will bite yet, but this will spread. Naomi didn't say anything. She was staring at her own reflection in the darkened window, barely recognizing the woman who looked back. Eliza followed her gaze. You know what's going to happen if we do this, right? Naomi nodded. They'll come for me. No, Eliza said. They'll come for both of us. And they won't knock next time. Naomi stood, her spine straight, her hands steady. Then we don't wait. We hit first. Hard. Eliza smiled grimly. I like the way you think. The upload began at 3:22 a.m. Eliza had converted the most damning files into a compressed packet, hidden behind a generic zip file name Langford Utility Grant Proposal, zip, then posted it across 5 encrypted forums, sent it to a network of independent journalists, and embedded it as metadata in a tweet that simply read, Langford isn't broken. It was built this way. Within 30 minutes, the download count passed 500. By sunrise, the file was trending on 2 subreddits and had been mirrored by a student-run journalism site in Oregon. But Naomi didn't sleep that night. Even after Eliza insisted she take the guest room and try to rest, she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest like a second spine. She thought about Camden, his crooked smile, the way he used to hum while washing dishes, how he'd ask questions that were too big for his age and too honest for this world. She thought about what they'd done to him. Not just the bullet, not just the lie, but the deliberate erasure, as if his life were a page in a report that could be redacted and discarded. But now the page was back, and this time it was on fire. At 8:12 a.m., Naomi's phone rang. Blocked number. She hesitated only a second before answering. Miss Bell, the voice said. Male. Measured. Slightly amused. Who is this? Someone who's disappointed in your recent decisions. Naomi's jaw tightened. Then stop watching. Problem solved. You've caused quite a mess. The man continued, unfazed. People are nervous. Order is shifting. That's dangerous. For everyone, for people like you maybe, for people like your mother. Naomi froze. The voice smiled. She could hear it in the silence. What do you want? I want balance, he said. And I want you to stop digging. I'm not digging, she said, voice cold. I'm planting. Another pause. Then Langford is very old. Very structured. Do you really think this crusade will change anything? No, Naomi said. I think it will burn everything that protects people like you. Click. The call ended. Naomi stood still for a moment, the silence ringing in her ears louder than the voice had been. Then she walked into the living room, where Eliza was already up, drinking coffee like it was armor. They called, Naomi said. Eliza didn't look surprised. What did he threaten? My mother. Balance. The usual nonsense. Eliza took a slow sip. Good. That means they're scared. That afternoon, the first official statement came from Langford PD. It was bland, defensive, full of legalese, ongoing investigation, unauthorized access, out-of-context information. Sheriff Mack didn't appear on camera. Instead, a spokesperson read from a sheet of paper while local reporters asked questions no one answered. But people were watching. And more importantly, people were asking. Naomi sat in the back of Eliza's office, watching the live stream on a cracked tablet, her arms crossed, jaw set. She wasn't a reporter. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a public figure. But she had something they didn't. The truth. And the courage to speak it, no matter who tried to shut her down. Because this wasn't just about Camden anymore. It was about Langford. And every town like it. And she wasn't going away. Not now. Not ever. Langford didn't erupt overnight. It trembled first quietly, like a fault line shifting beneath the surface, subtle enough for the powerful to pretend it was nothing but noise. But Naomi could feel it now, that rumbling undercurrent in every conversation, in every sideways glance at the grocery store, in every text from coworkers saying, "Are you okay?" without ever mentioning why. The town was cracking, and people could smell the smoke, even if they didn't yet see the fire. By midweek, 3 more regional news outlets had picked up Eliza's story. The file had been downloaded over 40,000 times. Independent journalists were reaching out. A podcast called Silent Towns had requested an interview. Civil rights attorneys had started circling like hawks. But just as the noise was growing louder, Naomi knew she had to go quieter. They wouldn't come for her guns blazing. Not yet. Langford was too careful for that. Instead, they would isolate her, discredit her, starve her credibility until no one remembered why she started speaking at all. So she planned. She stopped using her main phone and switched to a prepaid burner. She withdrew cash and avoided her debit card. She moved between safe houses, Eliza's office, Kayla's empty farmhouse, even the back room of the local library where an old friend gave her keys after hours with no questions asked. She wrote everything down, every threat, every face, every anonymous tip, and stored the pages in a hollowed-out law textbook labeled Property Torts, the irony of which she found satisfying. She also began mapping the deaths. Not just Camden, not just the names in the files, but every suspicious case in the last 10 years involving a young Black or Latino male within Langford County. She plotted them by date, location, and officer involved. It wasn't just that there were many. It was that they clustered. 2 officers appeared over and over again. Deputy Brent Kessler, Officer Dana Holt. Their names showed up in everything from juvenile arrests to school referrals, from overdose cleanups to missing person reports that were quietly closed. Kessler was known in town. Blonde, loud, always at barbecues with a beer in hand. Holt was quieter, the kind of woman who seemed polite until she wasn't, whose smile faded 1 second too early, leaving only the suspicion that it had never been real at all. Naomi shared this with Eliza, who raised an eyebrow and said, "They're more than enforcers. They're curators of what?" Naomi asked. "Control," Eliza replied. "They don't just punish the system's enemies. They manage its narrative." That night, while Naomi was reviewing old obituaries at the public library, her burner phone buzzed. No number. Just a text. "You don't know who I am, but I know what you're doing. And I want to help." She stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Another message followed. "Meet me at 10 p.m. 406 Grant Street. Basement entrance." Come alone, her instinct screamed trap. But something deeper, older whispered lead. She didn't reply. Just stared at the words until the screen went dark. Then walked slowly toward the archive desk, tucked her notes into her bag, and began planning her approach. At 9:57 p.m., Naomi stood at the edge of Grant Street. It was a quiet residential block, dotted with old houses in various states of disrepair. The kind of street where porch lights flickered and mailboxes leaned sideways. House 406 was painted blue once, now more chipped wood than color. The basement entrance was a short flight of cement steps tucked behind an overgrown hedge. Naomi took the steps slowly, her heart pounding not with fear, but with precision. She knocked once. The door creaked open. Inside was a dim hallway lit by a single yellow bulb. At the far end stood a man, early 52nds, balding, wire-framed glasses, wearing a Langford utility jacket that looked 1 size too large. His posture was stiff, but his eyes behind the glasses were alert, calculating. "You're Bell," he said. She didn't answer. He nodded. "Good. That means you're cautious. Who are you?" "Name's Richard Gray. I used to audit payroll for the county. Numbers man. Then I found numbers that didn't make sense. Numbers they didn't want explained." He stepped aside. Naomi entered. The basement was colder than Naomi expected, not the kind of chill that came from cracked cement or poor insulation, but the kind that seeped from old paper, from silence. From the weight of forgotten truths pressed between filing cabinets and manila folders, Richard led her through a narrow corridor lined with shelves, every surface cluttered with boxes labeled in faded Sharpie. Pension reports 2015, maintenance contracts raw, unused vouchers. She realized quickly this wasn't just a hiding place. It was a personal archive, a mausoleum of data that someone had refused to let disappear. At the end of the hallway, beneath a hanging bulb and a humming dehumidifier, sat a scarred wooden table with an aging desktop computer and a box full of spiral notebooks. "I started collecting all this 8 years ago," Richard said, gesturing vaguely. "Didn't mean to, really. Just noticed a few oddities, double entries, purchase orders without vendors, entire payroll lines for employees who didn't seem to exist." Naomi glanced at him. "And they let you keep working?" He chuckled without humor. "I was quiet. I made sure the errors didn't affect quarterly reports. But I also started printing everything." He pulled a folder from the box and laid it open in front of her. Inside was a copy of a city ledger with one line highlighted in pink. "Community Development Grant, Youth Correction Outreach to 75000. Sounds good on paper," Richard said. "Except no such program exists." He flipped the page, revealing another ledger. This one marked Public Education Allocations, Behavioral Diversion Services Pilot Phase 11000. Again, no office, no staff, no physical address. Naomi scanned the numbers. So where did the money go? He pointed to a third document, a wire transfer receipt, barely legible, but listing a name that made her stomach tighten. "Cleariver Corrections, Inc. Every quarter, funds are funneled from these ghost programs into the prison system. Labeled as consulting, reform initiatives, or sometimes even student transport reimbursements." Naomi's hands clenched. "And no one caught this?" "They did," Richard said softly. "One guy, David Go, used to run audits before me. Quiet guy. Clean. He flagged one of these entries in 2016. Sent an email to the mayor's office. Naomi didn't need to hear the rest. He died?" she asked. Richard nodded. "Car accident. Single vehicle. Brake failure, of course." They spent the next hour walking through the records. Richard showed her how officers like Kessler and Holt were consistently billed under special overtime hours, most of them logged during nights when teenagers had disappeared or overdosed. The hours were always coded under the same label. "Your Youth Response Directive." "I've never heard of that," Naomi said. "You weren't meant to." Richard pulled out one final folder. This one was thinner, newer. Inside was a copy of a contract dated March 1st, 2024, barely a month before Camden's death. The header read, "Memorandum of Understanding between Langford Police Department and Cleariver Corrections." Her eyes scanned the page. Her breath stopped when she hit the third clause. "To ensure facility sustainability and partner profitability, the Langford Police Department agrees to maintain an average monthly referral volume of 20 to juvenile or pre-adjudicated individuals meeting level 3-5 behavioral risk assessment criteria." Naomi whispered. "They had a quota." Richard met her gaze. "They didn't just take your brother because of who he was. They took him because he helped meet a number." She stared down at the paper, suddenly unable to feel her hands. This wasn't just cruelty. It was commerce. By the time Naomi left Richard Gray's basement, dawn was beginning to crack over Langford. The first light crept across rooftops and telephone wires like a quiet judgment, painting the sidewalks in pale blue and gold. She drove without music, without her phone turned on, without speaking aloud, the thoughts racing through her mind. The contract. The quotas. The bodies that fed those quotas. Camden. She had known, deep down, that her brother was not the first. But now she understood that he had never even been the exception, only part of a pattern, calculated and sustained like a business ledger balancing on human suffering. She reached Eliza's office just after 7. The door was locked, which was unusual. Eliza rarely locked up. She claimed the stories were worth more than the furniture, and she was usually right. Naomi knocked softly. No answer. She called Eliza's burner. Straight to voicemail, a flicker of unease passed through her. She waited 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. She circled the building, checking for signs of forced entry, nothing obvious. She tried the back door. Still locked. No lights inside. It wasn't until she checked the alley that she saw it. A smear small but dark on the gravel beside the recycling bin. Next to it, the faint outline of something pressed into the dirt. A shoe print. Size 10, maybe. The tread was military style. Her chest tightened. Naomi stepped back into her car, locked the doors, and breathed. She dialed Kayla's number. "Hey," Kayla answered, groggy. "What's up?" "Eliza's gone." That woke her up. Gone? Her office is locked. Phone dead. "I found blood in the alley." "Not much, but..." "Enough." There was a pause. "Come here," Kayla said. Double quotes now, double quotes, by 8:15 a.m. Naomi was back at the farmhouse. She pulled the blinds closed, locked every window, and laid out the documents from Richard's basement on the dining room table. There was no time to wait. Eliza was the public face of the investigation. Naomi had always been the quiet one, the insider. If they had taken Eliza, and Naomi had no doubt that's exactly what had happened, it was to send a message. She wasn't going to wait for a second message. She scanned the contract, converted it to PDF, and opened a draft email to every contact Eliza had shared with her. Anonymous tips inboxes, student journalists, independent investigators. She kept the body of the message short. "This is real. Langford Police Department has a juvenile quota agreement with Cleariver Corrections. One of us is missing. If I go next, you'll know why and B." She hovered over the send button. Then she clicked. And it was done. 2 hours later, a local blogger in Boise posted the contract in full. Within the hour, it was retweeted over 1,000 times. Someone attached the memo to a map showing Langford's arrest records by race. Another user overlaid the document with a viral video of Camden's funeral, where Naomi's mother had collapsed, wailing in a way that still echoed in Naomi's ears. The hashtag began trending. #Camden did not fit the quota. That afternoon, Naomi received an email from an encrypted source. "If you want to see her alive, you'll stop. No more uploads. No more names. We see everything. Double quotes. No name. No signature. Just a blurred still image attached to Eliza, bound at the wrists, sitting in a dark room." Naomi stared at the screen. No tears. No fear. Just a quiet, furious resolve. They thought they were silencing her. But all they had done was give her proof. And now, Naomi Bell wasn't just speaking for her brother. She was speaking for Eliza. And she would not stop. The air in Langford felt heavier now. Not the kind of weight you feel from weather or exhaustion, but the weight of being watched. Every step Naomi took was followed by the quiet suspicion that someone's eyes were already there. Street corners felt sharper. Car engines idled longer than they should. The ordinary hum of daily life, doors slamming, dogs barking, mailboxes closing, was wrapped in a layer of static. Eliza was still missing. And in her absence, the town had turned eerily polite. No protests. No angry letters. No reporters camped outside City Hall. Just a strange, buzzing silence. Too quiet. Too clean. It reminded Naomi of a phrase she had once heard in the trauma ward. Flatline isn't peace. Its warning on the third morning after Eliza's disappearance, Naomi received an envelope taped to the inside of her front door. No stamp. No handwriting. Just her name printed in small, blocky letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. Short. Clinical. You will receive an invitation within 24 hours. Decline it, and you'll never see your friend again. Accept it, and bring nothing but your voice. No devices. No witnesses. You will be heard. Once there was no signature. No threat. But Naomi understood the message. This wasn't an offer. It was a test. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the street, lit only by the occasional flicker of a passing car. Her mind replayed every detail: Eliza's bound wrists, the darkroom, the hint of a metal pipe behind her in the photo. She thought of Camden, of the files she had already released, of the ones still waiting to be unleashed like fire beneath the walls of the system. And she made her decision. She would go. She wouldn't bring backup. And she would listen once. The following day, at precisely 2:00 p.m., a black sedan pulled up to the curb outside Kayla's farmhouse. It didn't honk, didn't flash its lights, just sat there, humming softly. Naomi stepped outside, wearing jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt, and a coat with nothing in the pockets. Her hands were empty. Her resolve wasn't. The back door of the car opened. She got in. The windows were tinted. The interior smelled of leather and something faintly chemical. The driver never spoke, just nodded, shifted the car into gear, and drove. They left Langford behind within minutes, heading north, winding through forest roads that seemed more memory than map. No signs. No GPS. Only tree after tree after tree, the sun slicing through the branches like truth through lies. Finally, after nearly an hour, they pulled into a clearing. At the center stood an old lodge, stone walls, wooden beams, boarded up windows. It looked abandoned from the outside. But when Naomi stepped in, escorted by two silent men in dark jackets, she realized how misleading appearances could be. The inside was immaculate. Polished floors, subtle lighting, fresh coffee on a side table. And at the center of the room, a long table, more like something you'd find in a courtroom than a living room. At the far end sat three figures. No names, no titles, just posture, silence, and stillness. Naomi was guided to a single chair, placed alone in the center of the room, facing the table, but with space all around her like a defendant at trial or a sacrifice offered to some ancient tribunal. She didn't flinch. She sat and waited. One of the three figures, an older man with silver hair and a tailored charcoal suit, finally spoke. His voice was calm, crisp, almost kind. "Miss Bell, thank you for coming." "Miss Bell, thank you for coming." Naomi tilted her chin slightly. "I didn't come for thanks, no," he said. "You came for clarity. And perhaps for control." She met his gaze. "I came for Eliza." There was a pause. The man offered a soft smile. "She's alive. For now. But her fate, like yours, is contingent on what happens in this room." The man's words hung in the room like fog, thick and slow to lift. "Her fate, like yours, is contingent on what happens in this room." Naomi didn't respond right away. She knew better. In operating rooms, in courtrooms, in interrogation chambers like this, silence could be power. So she held his gaze steady and unblinking until he spoke again. "You've shaken the hive, Miss Bell," he said, folding his hands neatly on the table. "And now the swarm is restless." A second figure, a woman in her 60s with perfectly styled gray hair and a voice smooth as polished marble, leaned forward. "The files you've released. Impressive. Sloppy in their encryption, but effective in stirring panic. Truth doesn't need to be encrypted," Naomi said coldly. "It just needs to be seen." The woman's smile never reached her eyes. "And yet you're here, in this room, hoping that someone might offer you a trade." "I'm not here to bargain," Naomi replied. "I'm here to buy time. For Eliza." For the next upload, a third figure finally spoke. Younger, sharper, the kind of voice that had spent time in boardrooms, not courtrooms. "You think this ends with a video? A hashtag? Some trending headline on a platform none of us use? This town will survive your outrage. The machine doesn't break, it adjusts." Naomi leaned back slightly in her chair, folding her arms. "If that were true," she said evenly, "you wouldn't have called me here." The younger man smirked, but said nothing. "It was the first man, the one in the center who picked up the thread again. His tone shifted slightly. Not warmer, but more deliberate. We know who you are, Naomi. Not just your name, but what you've done. What you've overcome. You're smart, resourceful, resilient. And yes, you're angry, but you haven't let that anger destroy you. Not yet. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. You studied me. We prepare, the woman said softly. Preparation is survival, and you've survived a great deal, the man continued. The system didn't make room for you, and still you found your way in. First-generation college grade. Trauma nurse. Caregiver. Fighter. That takes discipline. Adaptability. Which brings us to the reason you're sitting here. He leaned forward slightly. The air in the room shifted. We want to offer you a position. Naomi blinked once. I'm sorry, what? Not employment, the man clarified. A seat. At the table. In the room where things are decided, a silence followed. You think I want power? Naomi asked, her voice flat. No, the woman said. We think you've earned it. And more importantly, you understand how fragile it is. You don't want to burn the system down, Miss Bell. You want to control it. Naomi's laugh was short and bitter. I want justice. Justice is perception, the younger man said. We offer structure, order, continuity. You offer corruption. We offer influence, the woman said. A hand on the wheel instead of a body under it. Naomi stood slowly. You think I'd sell everything I've bled for, everything Camden died for, so I can sit beside the people who built the machine? The man shrugged, as if her indignation were expected. Everyone chooses eventually. Some choose righteousness. Others choose relevance. You're forgetting a third option, Naomi said. And what's that? She stared at them, eyes steady, voice sharp as cut glass. Revenge. No one stopped her when she turned and walked out of the room. No guards stepped forward. No calls were made. No voices raised. The three figures simply sat there, watching her retreat, calm and composed like they'd done this before, and knew exactly how long it would take for most people to come crawling back. But Naomi Bell wasn't most people. The door to the lodge clicked shut behind her, and she didn't look back. She was driven back to Langford in the same black sedan, the same silent driver at the wheel. No one spoke. No music played. The trees passed like sentinels in the early evening light, and Naomi used every mile to replay the conversation, every word, every pause, every offer carefully laced in menace. They wanted her silenced. They just preferred it looked like her idea. But they had underestimated one thing. She never walked into fire without carrying matches. What none of them had noticed, what Naomi had made sure of before even stepping foot inside that lodge, was the tiny recording chip sewn into the seam of her sweatshirt sleeve. She had learned the trick from a paramedic friend years ago. Mini audio bug, voice triggered, 16 hours of storage. Barely larger than a SIM card. As soon as she stepped out of the car, she slipped into Kayla's farmhouse, locked the door behind her, and plugged the chip into her laptop. The file was clean, clear. Every word in that room captured, every sentence from the man with the silver hair, every cold calculation from the woman in pearls, every smug declaration from the younger mouthpiece. She listened to it once, all the way through, and let it settle in her bones, not as fear, but as fuel. Then she uploaded it to a private folder, added a transcript, time-stamped each quote, and attached it to an auto-scheduled post set to go live the next morning across every major platform she had access to. At 7 o'clock a.m. sharp, the world would hear the truth. Not just the facts, but the voices. Before midnight, Naomi took one last step. She made a phone call. It rang 4 times before connecting. Kendall Price, the voice said. Federal investigator. Contact of Eliza's. The man who had first said, I believe you. Naomi didn't waste time. I have a full recording, she said. 3 senior operatives. Langford's real architects. I want Federal protection. And I want it now. A pause. You have proof? You'll have it in 6 hours. He didn't ask how. He didn't ask if it was legal. He just said, "Where are you?" She gave him the coordinates. At 6:42 a.m. She received a text from Kendall. "We're 10 minutes out. Do not move." At 6:58 a.m., the recording dropped. By 7:04 a.m., it had 14,000 plays. By 7:15 a.m., it hit national news. By 7:30 a.m., Langford Police Department's official website crashed from the surge in traffic, and by 8:10 a.m., CNN aired a segment titled, "The Secret Courtroom Whistleblower Exposes Hidden Power Network in Rural Idaho." Eliza was released that afternoon. She was found tied to a chair in an empty shipping container 2 towns over, shaken, dehydrated, but alive. No prints. No witnesses. But the message was clear. We lost this round. But we're still watching. Naomi didn't care. She'd drawn blood. And now the world was watching too. By the time noon, sunlight broke across the rooftops of Langford. The recording had already gone global. Clips of Naomi's conversation in the silent room, pulled directly from her secret audio file, were being translated into Spanish, French, Vietnamese. A major streamer reacted to the entire 17-minute file on Twitch, his jaw clenched and voice shaking. Hashtags multiplied. Pundits argued on cable news. Advocacy groups scheduled press conferences in 3 states. But Naomi was already 3 moves ahead, because she knew something the rest of the world didn't yet understand. This wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of open war. She and Eliza hadn't spoken much since the rescue. Eliza had been hospitalized for observation and dehydration, released within 24 hours. But she moved differently now, slower, quieter. Not broken, but recalibrated. As if part of her had absorbed the darkroom she'd been held in and hadn't yet let it go. They met in a side room of the local community center, under the radar, using a code word text chain and burner phones. Naomi handed her a bottle of water and a file folder. "They're scared," she said. "The fact that they let you live? That wasn't a favor. It was a mistake." Eliza nodded, thumbing through the folder. "You uploaded the audio?" "Everywhere. Then we've just narrowed our window." Naomi leaned forward. "We need to hit them again. Harder." Eliza looked up. "The file you said you hadn't released yet, Mac's private line. Do you still have it?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. Then slowly, "It's not just him talking. It's him authorizing removals. Names, dates. Including my brother. Including kids we haven't even heard about yet. Where's the recording? Offline. Triple encrypted. Physical drive, no network. We need it." Naomi exhaled. "It's at the clinic." Eliza blinked. "The hospital?" "I stashed it there after Camden's autopsy. Deep in storage, behind a wall vent in exam room 3. Nobody ever uses it anymore." Eliza sat back. "So we go in tonight?" Naomi nodded. "After close. No guards. Just us." That evening, as the last of the nurses clocked out and the night cleaning crew wandered in with their carts and tired music, Naomi slipped in through the side emergency entrance, using her staff badge, one of the last privileges she hadn't yet lost. Eliza followed 5 steps behind, hoodie up, eyes scanning. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and aging bureaucracy. They passed the staff kitchen, the locked med supply closet, and the vacant intake bay. Then, exam room 3. Naomi opened the door. Inside, the room was dark, cold, and still. The exam table was draped in a paper sheet that hadn't been replaced in weeks. The cabinets were empty. It looked forgotten, which made it perfect. She knelt beside the far wall, where a heating vent had been unscrewed once before, but when she reached for the cover, she froze. The vent was already loose, slightly ajar. She stared at it, heart sinking. "Eliza," she said quietly. "Someone's been here." Naomi stared at the open vent, her breath caught in her throat. She reached inside slowly, feeling the edges of the hidden cavity, fingers brushing against cool metal, but not the thick, heavy drive she had stashed weeks ago. Instead, she pulled out something thinner, flatter, and colder. A single flash drive, wrapped in a folded sheet of paper. No label, no logo. Just an ordinary black stick, unremarkable in every way except that it shouldn't have been there. Naomi turned to Eliza, who was already closing the door behind them and pulling the blinds down. Someone replaced it. Eliza asked. Naomi nodded, unfolding the paper slowly. 3 words were printed in block letters across the center of the page. I know everything, underneath, and smaller handwriting. You're not the only one trying to burn it down. I'm inside. I can help. Meet me alone. 11:30 p.m. Parking structure level B3. Langford Justice Center. Ask for the scribe. Eliza read over Naomi's shoulder, her brow furrowing. The scribe? What the hell kind of code name is that? The kind people use when they've read too many spy thrillers, Naomi muttered, still staring at the note, but this is legit. Naomi held up the flash drive. We're about to find out. Back at the farmhouse, with every wireless signal jammed and every camera covered, Naomi inserted the flash drive into a secure offline laptop. Eliza hovered behind her, arms crossed, the tension in the room thick as solder. The drive contained a single folder. Inside, 3 files, a spreadsheet titled Langford GD Network Map, Zelsex, a text document. They're watching everyone. Double quotes. An audio file. Sheriff Mac conf call B priv, MP3. Naomi opened the spreadsheet first. The cells populated with a web of connections: officers, judges, school board members, business owners. Each name linked to specific cases, payouts, arrests, transfers. Color-coded, structured, meticulous, a shadow network. Eliza let out a low whistle. Whoever did this. They've been watching a long time. Naomi opened the text file. Inside was a brief message. I was part of it. Recruited at 24. Trained to falsify reports, reroute evidence, and disappear records. But then came Camden Bell. He wasn't supposed to die. They were only supposed to process him. The system panicked. I've been collecting receipts ever since. My name doesn't matter. What I have does. I can give you access to their internal communications. But you'll have to come alone. No one can know I flipped if they find out. They'll bury me like they tried to bury your brother. Eliza looked at Naomi. You trust this? No, Naomi said. But I believe it. She leaned back in her chair, mind racing. They were being watched. Of that, she was certain, but someone inside the scribe was risking everything to reach her. It could be a trap. Or it could be the keystone. Eliza hesitated. You're not seriously thinking about going alone, are you? I'm not going to win this war by staying behind walls. Naomi, I've been reactive this whole time. Now it's time to move first. The Langford Justice Center slept like a monster between meals, still, cold, and coiled. At 11:25 p.m. Naomi stood at the edge of the underground parking structure, the wind pressing against her coat, her breath forming slow clouds in the air. Level B3 was silent, except for the distant hum of ventilation fans and the soft click of her footsteps against concrete. Fluorescent lights overhead flickered like blinking eyes, watching, judging, waiting. She had told no one. Not Eliza. Not Kayla. Not even Kendall. This was her move. Her choice. Her risk. At the far end of the lot, past a row of police cruisers with government plates, stood a figure in a dark overcoat, back turned, hands tucked into pockets. Naomi approached slowly. You the scribe? She asked, her voice calm but sharp. The figure turned. And her breath caught. He was young, maybe 35, pale skin, neatly cropped beard, black-rimmed glasses. Eliza read over Naomi's shoulder, her brow furrowing. The scribe? What the hell kind of code name is that? The kind people use when they've read too many spy thrillers, Naomi muttered, still staring at the note. But this is legit. Naomi held up the flash drive. We're about to find out. Back at the farmhouse, with every wireless signal jammed and every camera covered, Naomi inserted the flash drive into a secure offline laptop. He looked like an analyst or a teacher, not someone who'd spent years building files that could destroy an entire power structure, but it was his badge that stunned her. Pinned discreetly under his lapel, barely visible, Langford Police Internal Affairs. Naomi's voice dropped. You're a cop. I was, he said. Still am, technically. But not theirs. Not anymore. She narrowed her eyes. Why me? Because you're the first person who didn't try to leverage the system, he said. You didn't want money. You didn't want power. You wanted justice. And that makes you dangerous. He pulled a small hard drive from his coat pocket and handed it to her. What's this? She asked. A tunnel into their back channel. He nodded. Encrypted comms. Think signal, but custom built. All the people in the files I gave you. This is how they coordinate. Court case rigging. Officer cover-ups. Bribes. Even media contacts. It's all there. Raw and unfiltered. Naomi held the drive in her palm like a beating heart. What's the catch? The man's eyes flicked to the far stairwell. There's a cleanup operation scheduled in for days, he said. That's when Mac goes dark disappears. Everything gets wiped. Servers, personnel records, financial trails. If you want to end this, you need to go public before then. And not with leaks. You need a full exposure. A blowtorch. Naomi nodded slowly. Then we light the match. He took a step back. After this, I'm gone. Don't try to find me. Naomi stared at him. Why now? He hesitated, then spoke so quietly, she almost didn't catch it. Because I helped bury Camden Bell. And I want to help dig him out. And with that, he turned and disappeared into the stairwell, swallowed by shadow. Back at the farmhouse, Naomi sat alone at the table, drive in hand, laptop humming. The files loaded slowly, line after line of chats, orders, names, numbers. She opened one labeled Disruption Protocols. Inside, instructions on how to smear whistleblowers, plant drugs, erase court records. Another folder, Media Containment. Inside, lists of local journalists with price tags. But what shook her most wasn't the content. It was the date stamps. They went back 12 years. Camden was only 5 when this system started swallowing boys like him. And now she held its map. By sunrise, she had compiled the master file, all names, all links, all communications. One file, one shot. She sent a message to Kendall Price. I'm ready. The auditorium didn't look like justice. It looked like compromise. Rows of folding chairs arranged too neatly beneath humming fluorescent lights. A modest state seal projected on a curtainless wall. Cheap plastic cups stacked beside a water dispenser, like afterthoughts. Cameras perched on tripods at the back, unmanned but blinking. And above it all, the silence of bureaucracy, sterile, controlled, waiting. But Naomi Bell was done waiting. This was no courtroom. No grand jury chamber. This was a hastily organized state oversight hearing, forced into the public eye by the sheer velocity of her disclosures and the rising tide of national attention. The headlines alone had made the state act. Secret prison pipeline in Idaho. Langford whistleblower releases dozens of internal tapes. The Naomi Bell files. So now, here she stood in front of a panel of state legislators, civil rights attorneys, and one very uncomfortable representative from the governor's office, ready to speak. Not as a victim, not as a sister, but as a witness, and as a threat. They called her name at 9:03 a.m. She walked to the microphone slowly, deliberately, every step echoing across the polished floor. Her breath was steady. Her notes stayed in her pocket. She wasn't here to read. She was here to burn the rot from the root. Good morning, she began. Her voice was clear, low, and full of weight. My name is Naomi Bell. I'm a registered nurse. a lifelong Idaho resident, and the sister of Camden Bell, who was 17 when Langford police killed him. They said it was a justified use of force, that he was a threat, that it was unfortunate but necessary. She paused. I'm here to tell you that none of that was true. The room was quiet, still. Naomi continued, in the past 4 weeks, I have uncovered and published over 350 internal documents, emails, contracts, audio files proving the existence of a coordinated system of racial targeting, data falsification, and illegal cooperation between Langford law enforcement and a private prison contractor, Clear River Corrections. She looked directly at the panel now, and that system required a steady flow of bodies. She laid it out for them calmly, methodically. The quotas, the school-to-prison pipeline, the youth behavioral risk classifications designed to justify targeting children of color. She played the audio files, Sheriff Mack giving orders, the silent room figures offering her power in exchange for silence, the full transcript of the contract clause outlining monthly juvenile intake goals. She showed them the map, names, faces, dates, and then, finally, she showed them Camden. This is my brother, she said, holding up the photo the police had never included in their official statement. Camden smiling, eyes bright, a tray of cupcakes in his hands. He was not a threat. He was a quota. One of the legislators shifted in their seat. Another scribbled something furiously on a legal pad. Naomi didn't care, because this wasn't about their reactions. This was about the record. She ended her testimony with a single sentence. If this state does not hold its systems accountable, then it deserves to be exposed for what it truly is, a machine that feeds on silence. And with that, she stepped back from the microphone. The room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. But something changed. Something moved. And it wasn't just the public. It was the system itself rattling, for the first time from the inside. The applause never came. Not that Naomi expected it. The kind of truth she carried didn't end in ovations, it ended in consequences. So when she stepped off the hearing platform and walked down the aisle toward the exit, flanked by 2 plainclothes marshals, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt alert, like an animal who had made noise in a forest too quiet for safety. Outside the courthouse, the press surged forward, microphones, cameras, questions. She kept her eyes low, her pace steady. No comment. No pause. They reached the black SUV waiting by the curb. A federal detail, assigned just that morning after a leak suggested Naomi might be targeted by concerned affiliates of the Langford network. She opened the door. The first bullet shattered the windshield. It happened fast. The sound of glass exploding, a low, mechanical pop-suppressed rifle, the agent in the driver's seat slumping forward without a sound. Another shot ripping through the passenger side mirror. Screams from the press corps. Naomi hit the ground. Her marshal grabbed her by the shoulder and dragged her behind the engine block as another round clipped the rear wheel well, sparking metal and smoke. Sniper, someone shouted, roof, southeast. But the shooter was gone before backup arrived, faded into the sprawl of rooftop HVAC units and gravel, like a shadow dissolving in fog. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but its message would echo for years. You're getting too close. And now we don't care who sees. Naomi sat in the back of an armored vehicle 10 minutes later, blood from the shattered glass dried against her cheek, her breath tight, her body buzzing with adrenaline and fury. Kendall Price sat beside her, eyes scanning a tablet of internal reports and public reactions pouring in real time. They crossed a line, he said quietly. Naomi wiped her face with the back of her hand. Good. Now the world knows it's real. He turned to her. We need to move you. Off-grid. For good. She shook her head. No, I'm not hiding. They just tried to kill you in front of 24 reporters. Exactly, she said. That's their mistake. They pulled the trigger before the silence finished collapsing. That evening, #Naomi Bell trended across every major platform. Clips from the attack went viral, A still image of Naomi shielding herself behind the vehicle appeared on the front page of every major newspaper. CNN aired a special segment. From Grief to Target, the story of Naomi Bell, MSNBC called it. The trial they tried to silence, but Naomi didn't watch the coverage. She sat in a safe house an hour outside Langford, staring at a printed list of names her next targets. Mac's remaining allies. Officers. Funders. Operatives. She circled 3 names in red. These weren't soldiers. They were planners. And it was time to dismantle the final layer. The first building to burn wasn't a police station. It was the Langford Records Annex, 2 stories of wood and cinder block tucked between the firehouse and a shuttered dry cleaning store. At 3:42 a.m., the night before the federal task force was scheduled to arrive, flames erupted through the top floor windows. By 4:15, it was gone. Every paper file, every logbook, every handwritten arrest slip from the last decade ashes. The fire marshal called it an unfortunate electrical accident, but everyone in Langford knew better. The system wasn't dying quietly. It was erasing itself. Naomi stood across the street behind the police barricade, smoke curling through the pre-dawn sky, the air thick with char and lies. Eliza stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes red from lack of sleep. That wasn't just records, Eliza muttered. That was evidence. Patterns. Paper trails. Naomi didn't answer. She was staring at the last piece of the building, still standing a brick archway above the entrance, scorched but intact. Carved into the stone were 3 words: order, justice, legacy. She turned away. By sunrise, things unraveled fast. The school board voted to suspend the superintendent without comment. 2 council members resigned within hours. And by noon, a protest erupted outside Langford City Hall, not organized by activists or outsiders, but by students. Teenagers, some carried posters of Camden Bell's face. Others shouted the names Naomi had spoken in the live stream. One sign simply read, "We are not quotas." Naomi watched from a rooftop across the square, heart pounding not from fear, but from the sight of something she thought she'd never live to see. Langford refusing to play dead. Kendall Price stood beside her, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. "This is the tipping point," he said. "Once kids get involved, the narrative breaks. Or they try to crush it," Naomi replied. "They already tried," he said, nodding toward the smoldering wreckage down the street. "And they're out of plays," but Naomi wasn't so sure, because one man still hadn't surfaced. Sheriff Mac. No statements. No camera appearances. No arrests. It was like he'd vanished. But Naomi had a theory. Men like Mac didn't run. They repositioned. And the more unstable the system became, the more likely it was he'd make one last move, not to save himself, but to destroy whatever threatened him most. Naomi Bell, that evening, while she and Eliza reviewed affidavits for the upcoming state investigation, a knock echoed at the farmhouse door. Not urgent. Not rushed. Just firm. 3 raps. Eliza moved toward the window, peeled back the curtain. She froze. Naomi was already on her feet, hand instinctively reaching toward her coat, where the small canister of pepper spray lay hidden. "Who is it?" she whispered. Eliza turned slowly, her face pale. "It's Mac." Naomi opened the door slowly, and for a split second, time felt suspended, like the air itself was waiting to decide whether to collapse in fear or explode in fury. Sheriff Mac stood there, older, smaller than she remembered, not in uniform, but in a dark coat worn from dust and distance. His shoulders stooped in a way that suggested not defeat, but exhaustion. He didn't bring a weapon. He didn't bring threats. He brought a small black case in one hand, and a strange, quiet calm in his eyes. Naomi didn't move from the doorway. Her voice was steady, stripped of emotion. "Talk," she said. Mac lifted the case. "I have something you need to see." "I don't need anything from you," she replied, but her eyes flicked toward the object in his hand. He opened it slowly, revealing a powered-on tablet with a single video file blinking on the screen. "This isn't about me," Max said. "It's about someone you trust." Naomi took the tablet without a word, keeping her distance, her fingers steady as she tapped the file. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped from nearly a year ago. A small, barren waiting room under harsh fluorescent light. Camden Bell sat alone in the center of the frame, hood up, leg bouncing, his body language restless, but not violent. Then the door opened, and a man walked in. Tall, unassuming, dressed like a bureaucrat. Naomi leaned closer, eyes narrowing. The angle made it hard to see, but the moment he sat down and leaned forward to speak, the posture, the voice, the energy, they were unmistakable. It was Richard Gray, the man who had helped Naomi uncover the prison contracts, who had shown her financial records that exposed the corruption, who had claimed he was a quiet rebel in the system. But in this video, he wasn't warning Camden. He wasn't exposing anything. He was recruiting. His gestures were slow, practiced, deliberate, like a man trying to talk someone into something they didn't want. Camden leaned back, then shook his head. He stood up. Richard stood too. He reached into his coat. Camden visibly flinched. Then the footage cut out. No context. No audio. But enough to twist something inside Naomi that she hadn't felt since the day her brother died. The fear that even now, she didn't know the full story. She turned to Mac, her voice quieter, but colder. "What was that?" He didn't answer right away. When he spoke, his tone was careful, not gloating. Camden was flagged by a protocol designed to test resistance. They targeted kids who seemed smart, too smart kids who wouldn't fall in line. Richard was part of that. Back then, he played both sides. He offered Camden a way out. Camden refused. Naomi's hands curled into fists. And then what? Mac looked at her directly. He got marked as non-compliant. That's when the wheels started turning. And you know the rest. Naomi didn't respond. Her thoughts churned, pulled between disbelief and the horrifying realization that it made sense that the inconsistencies in Richard's story, the way he always seemed to know where to look, what to say, when to appear, had never been coincidence. So why now? She finally asked. Why show me this? Mac didn't blink. Because you're smart enough to know that the truth doesn't care who it hurts. You've exposed a rotten system. But if you're going to bring it down for real, you need to know that even your allies have blood on their hands. Naomi held the tablet tighter, the video still frozen on the image of Camden mid-step, caught between choice and consequence. She wanted to scream, to deny it, to call it a setup, but she couldn't. Not yet. Mac handed her a thin envelope. There's more in there. Surveillance logs. Internal memos. You'll find the truth. Whether you want it or not. He turned and walked away. No further words, no parting shot. Just silence. Naomi stood in the doorway long after he disappeared into the dark, her thoughts unraveling faster than she could hold them together. And inside her, something shifted, not doubt, not regret, but the cold, sharp knowledge that the final enemy might not be the one hiding behind badges and guns, but the one who stood beside her and called it justice. Naomi stood frozen, her eyes locked on the blank screen as Mac's words echoed through the cool night air, not loud, not threatening, but heavy, measured like a blade laid gently across a table. She didn't want to believe what she had seen. Didn't want to admit that the person who had helped her uncover the prison contracts, the person who had pointed her toward the financial rot festering beneath Langford, might have once sat across from Camden as part of that very machine. But the footage didn't lie. Richard Gray had been there in that waiting room, talking to Camden like a handler more than a stranger. There was no audio, no timestamp, and no context, but there was one undeniable truth. Richard had known more than he had ever told her. What was he doing? Naomi asked, barely able to push the words past the tightness in her throat. Mac's reply came without triumph. That room was part of a diversion protocol. They'd bring in smart kids, vulnerable ones, first-time offenders. Kids without records, test them, push them, see if they'd flip. Some agreed. Most didn't. Camden didn't. Naomi's stomach turned. And then Mac exhaled slowly. Gray flagged him, put him on a watch list, labeled him non-compliant. That's when the order came down. She wanted to scream, to hit something, to reject every syllable of what she was hearing. But deep down, she knew it fit. It explained the gaps in Richard's stories, the things he seemed to know before she ever showed him the files. He hadn't been a whistleblower from the start. He'd been part of the structure. And only after Camden died, after the guilt seeped in, had he tried to undo what he'd helped build. So why give me this now? Naomi asked, her voice harder now. Because you deserve the whole truth, Mac said, even if it burns your allies. Even if it breaks the story you've been telling yourself. Naomi stared at him for a long time, unsure whether she hated him more for what he'd done or for the fact that, in this moment, he might be the only one who wasn't lying. Then Mac handed her a second file. This one smaller, marked with a single name, R. Gray. Inside were internal memos, timestamps, surveillance logs, proof that Richard had been working for the Langford Data Division for over 6 years. He had gone silent for only the last 10 months, just before Camden's death. That was when his allegiance shifted. That was when he started leaking. I'm not asking for redemption, Max said. I'm telling you that if you want to finish what you started, you'll need to see all of it, even the pieces that hurt. Naomi took the file and stepped back inside the farmhouse, not saying another word. She didn't invite him in. She didn't thank him. She simply closed the door and locked it, the click echoing through the hallway like the closing of a vault. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with Eliza, the video replaying silently beside them, the file spread open across the wood grain. The betrayal was sharp, but the clarity was sharper. There would be no clean ending, no story without fractures, only truth, and the price it demanded. Naomi didn't flinch when she clipped the lavalier mic to Richard's collar. She didn't offer comfort, no forgiveness, no softness in her voice, just professionalism, cold, focused, necessary. They stood in front of the old altar, faded light slanting through the fractured stained glass, illuminating dust motes and the quiet ruin of faith. The church had long been abandoned, but in this moment it held something sacred again, accountability. The camera beeped. Red light. Rolling. Naomi stepped back. State your name, she said, voice steady. Richard Gray, he replied, and your former position. Senior Financial Compliance Auditor, Langford County Budget Office. Formerly contracted with the Juvenile Diversion Task Force. What do you want people to know? He hesitated, but only for a second, that the system wasn't broken. It was built this way. For the next 10 minutes, he spoke. Names, dates, documents, terminology. How Camden had been flagged by a behavioral algorithm. How the resistance index was designed to be ambiguous, so boys like him could be classified as non-compliant without clear justification. How he had signed the transfer report that moved Camden into a Category 3 escalation protocol. How he had told himself it was just paperwork. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for sympathy. He told the truth. At the end, he looked directly into the lens. I did this. And people like me, quiet people, obedient people, we made it all possible. We thought staying in the shadows would keep us clean. But silence was complicity. And it killed Camden Bell. Naomi turned off the camera. The silence that followed was enormous. Back at the farmhouse, Naomi uploaded the video to 4 platforms and sent it to every journalist who had ever tried to contact her. No editing. No headlines. Just full confession of Richard Gray, former Langford compliance officer. It exploded. By nightfall, the clip had been viewed over 2 million times. Within hours, news networks were dissecting every sentence. Lawyers were issuing subpoenas. 2 state senators who had appeared in Gray's timeline announced sudden medical leaves. The Department of Justice called an emergency briefing. But Naomi didn't celebrate, because one name hadn't surfaced. The one missing from all the files. The one Richard hadn't mentioned. The one Naomi suspected had always stayed off paper, off camera, and above it all. Eliza Tran. The realization didn't crash into Naomi like a wave. It crept in quiet and methodical as she sifted through the files for the 100th time. Every document, every email, every line of evidence pointed outward toward cops, contractors, politicians, paper pushers. But one name, one thread, one presence that had been constant through it all was missing. Eliza Tran. The one person who had been there from the start. The one who had shown up with just enough knowledge, just enough anger, just enough timing. Naomi had always believed Eliza found her. But what if that wasn't the whole truth? She flipped back through a memo dated long before she and Eliza ever met. A redacted email addressed to the Juvenile Diversion Task Force from someone listed only as a media compliance consultant. The signature was scrubbed, but the initials remained. Eat. At first, she dismissed it. Coincidence. A ghost. But as she dug deeper, as she matched it against an old city contract that Eliza once mentioned having burned before ever opening, the connections began to feel too precise. The phrasing, the language, the access, the timing. Eliza hadn't stumbled into the story. She had been woven into it from the beginning. That night, Naomi sat across from her in the kitchen of the farmhouse, no laptop, no recorder, no defenses. Just 2 mugs of untouched tea and a silence so dense it felt like it could shatter under its own weight. I need you to tell me the truth, Naomi said, and Eliza didn't even blink. She didn't ask which truth. She didn't pretend not to understand. She simply looked down at the table for a moment, then met Naomi's eyes and said, I worked for them. Naomi didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just listened, motionless, as Eliza explained. She had been brought in years ago to help manage the story, to spin the statistics, to soften the narratives when the data became too ugly to hide. She told herself she was helping, making the pain palatable, preventing full collapse. She believed, for a time, that what she was doing was damage control, not complicity. And then came Camden. And everything changed. You let me believe you were clean, Naomi whispered. I let you believe I changed, Eliza replied. Because I did. Naomi stood, stepping away from the table, her voice steadier than her breath. You helped me build this. You helped me fight it, Eliza nodded. And if I hadn't, none of this would have happened. But you lied, Naomi said. You let me stand on a foundation you helped pour. Eliza didn't defend herself. I was trying to dismantle it from the inside. So was Richard, Naomi said. And I exposed him. Eliza didn't flinch. She only asked one question. Are you going to do the same to me? Naomi looked out the window, the prairie beyond fading into night, and said the words that felt heavier than anything she'd spoken before. Yes. The next morning, Naomi released one final file. It didn't have a name in the title. It didn't come with an editorial, a warning, or a call to action. It simply said, the last missing piece. Inside was Eliza's history, her early contracts, her consulting records, her confession spoken plainly, quietly, into Naomi's phone. She didn't name herself a villain. She didn't beg for redemption. She told the truth. And Naomi let the world decide what to do with it. The reaction was swift. Some turned against Naomi, accusing her of betrayal. Others hailed her as the only one willing to stand all the way alone. But most understood the real weight of her choice. That justice, if it was to mean anything, had to be blind not only to power, but to loyalty. 1 week later, Sheriff Mack was captured at a private airstrip in Arizona. Richard Gray testified before a federal grand jury. Clear River Corrections was dissolved. Langford Police Department was dismantled. And Naomi Bell, once just a sister with a grieving heart and a trembling voice, was summoned to Washington to help draft legislation that would prevent what happened in Langford from ever happening again. She wore a black blazer. No makeup. No smile. And when asked what she hoped people would remember, she answered without hesitation that the system wasn't broken. It was built this way, but it was built by people, and people can take it apart. Naomi Bell didn't set out to be a hero. She wasn't looking for a spotlight, a headline, or a legacy. She was just a sister, a daughter, a woman who refused to stay silent while the world erased her brother. But in a town built on secrets, the truth is fire. And once it starts burning, it doesn't stop. This story is a reminder. The system doesn't collapse in a day, but it cracks every time someone dares to speak, every time someone refuses to look away. So if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, question something, remember someone, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue to uncover stories that challenge injustice, amplify unheard voices, and ignite change one voice at a time. Hit the bell so you never miss what they want you to forget. Thank you for watching. And remember, the system was built. That means we can tear it down together.